Hi, everybody. I love that voice. Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Um, Listen, chronologically, this is the end of July, and I've been listen. I have this great. I think it's a great thing that Jacob and we kind of discovered each other. Uh, I'm with Jacob Waller, and how we came about. I don't remember exactly, but online. And Jacob has a podcast called Conversation with Jacob. I have a podcast, Conversation with Calvin, We the Species. So there's that element of commonality, and we eventually and Jacob invited me to be a guest on his podcast, and I'm returning the favor. And we had done this interview last week, and it was great, and I loved it, Jacob, because it was so incisive and deep, and you just about there's nothing left of my life that you didn't talk about. But and we just talked about it, the magnetic element of having met Jacob, and we just talked about it before he went on air. Jacob is in Virginia. Actually, Jacob's right down the road from Mount Airy, which is for those of you who are old enough, at the Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry. So the wonderful thing about Jacob, and he's got a great podcast. We're going to talk all about it. I'm a Jersey guy, and he's a Virginia guy, and country and rural. So there's this dichotomy, or different backgrounds, but yet we're brought together because we do. We both love the whole world of podcasts. So that makes this even better. The chemistry and the bonding and the uniqueness of the difference. I like that, the uniqueness of our difference. Our world's just different. I've got 8 million neighbors out my window, and you don't. I'm a Jersey guy, and so. But anyway, that adds to the fuel and the mystique of this very special interview. That this is my monologue. It's done. I'm going to turn it over to Jacob if you do a little bit of a background, and then we're going to jump into stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Jacob. I'm from a small town in Virginia with population of like 900 people. I'm a YouTube creator, podcaster. s- there's really not much about me except for I'm just a country boy, like you mentioned. It's not really much to do in a small town. So I just enjoy doing podcasts and YouTube.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. So, um, it's funny. I grew up in Newark, and a funny thing happened in, I guess it was the late 50s. This new singer came around, and the instant I heard Elvis Presley, I loved Elvis Presley, and it was part of, listen, he was part of, that was the changing of the guard. The changing of the guard, we had Jerry Lee Lewis and Bill Haley in the comments and stuff. But Elvis was a whole changing of the guard, and of course I loved it, and I grew up to it. And you are a big Elvis fan, so just you can just we'll talk a little bit more about Elvis, but if say some things, and when did you discover and fall in love with Elvis?
Well, it's actually a funny story, actually. I'll say around between 2000 and 2003, my brother's dad, his mom, had this big picture of Elvis on the wall. And I thought he might have been kind of famous or maybe related to the family in some way. Because back then, people always kept pictures of families on the walls or on the tables. So every time I would go into uh, every time I go into her house, would always look at that picture and always be memorized about the black hair and the blue eyes. And of course, I didn't know who he was at the time until years later when I found out he was Elvis Presley. I was buying every CD, it was every magazine, and my collection has grown over the years, which I didn't think it would have grown so big. And like a good friend of mine has said before, and she said I was born in the wrong era because I'm a fan of Elvis Presley,
Yeah.
and and of course, people my age, they're a fan of like the modern day stuff.
Okay. Funny, a song came on. So I downstairs in my basement, I have old 45s from when I grew up. I saved them. And I have I guess the original Love Me Tender. Um um and it's funny, Love Me Tender, my fraternity when I was in college, they had their fraternity song, and it was to the melody of Love Me Tender. But I, I'm I marveled at Elvis. I loved his career. I mean, everything about him. Yes, there's tragic elements because he should have still been here. That's the tragedy. He should have still been here, but he just got caught up in all that. And by the way, the other night, I can't help falling in love with you. I listened to Pandora music, when I'm sitting here, Jacob, and I can't. So that song came up. I can't help falling in love with you, and like it's a wow. He was a
Oh
wow.
yeah.
I mean the move, everything about him was a wow. Um, do you have any like Elvis stories and some of your
Well, one of my Elvis stories, was actually was I'm good friends with his hairdresser, the name of Larry Getter. Oh, it's, I mean, like connections with him,
right?
and and he's told me some stories over the years. There was some good and some bad, but recently a good friend of mine from Tennessee, and she sent me some newspaper articles from 1977.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, they was published on the day he died, and they're original newspapers. And when I got them, I was like, I can't believe I'm holding something that's 40 some years old.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, because when I was holding the newspapers, it was like I was in a dream or something.
Wow.
So I don't really have no Elvis stories besides me becoming a fan of me just jamming out to Elvis almost 24 hours a day. Which I know my mom is probably tired of it by now.
So you listen, I came out in the 60s, and in the 50s and 60s. So Elvis was the first original person the music that I fell in love with. As the 50s became the 60s, I started listening to folk music, and that's where I still reside today. I'm just a folkie, Peter, Paul and Mary and Simon and Garfunkel and Joan Baez. I mean, that's my stuff. But in the middle, in the mix of that, is Elvis, because those songs. Hey, listen, music it's such a powerful force for me. I could put on a song and it would just like lift me up and take me to different worlds. My goodness. But Elvis part of my, he's listen, he's part of my world. Uh, um,
And if you think about it, and every Elvis song can relate to something that's going on in your life.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And either something going on in my life, or maybe uh somebody I was dating, some girl I was dating, and there's a song, and but it just, and I've watched so many, there's so many movies and so many documentaries, on his life, and Colonel Parker and all that, and I always felt bad for Elvis when the Beatles started coming here and the world was changing, his world, which he had for like 10 years, you know,
Yeah.
that was his world. Um, uh, but there's just so much about him that I'm a fan. But there was so much about him. But in the middle of all my thinking about Elvis, whenever I hear his music, I always say to myself, Jacob, that he should be here today, enjoying his grandchildren and stuff and stuff. And um, anyway, do you ever go to Graceland?
Which I never been to Graceland, which I'm hoping to go one day.
Okay, okay, okay. Are there any other musical influences that you have?
Well, besides Elvis, I really don't know.
Okay. Hey. You don't need, you know what? You don't need, that's enough. There's plenty
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I can't even imagine how many songs he recorded. He must be in the hundreds, something like that.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
reading that somewhere, how prolific he was. And people who got a towel when he was doing his, concert, like, wow. I never got a chance to see him in person because I just never did. Um, okay, so I'm because I know nothing about country living. So just a few words that you live in the Amount area and Mayberry and in rural living, and there's something I didn't know as I did my research. You got a huge, furniture industry there too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about your world.
It's not much to talk about with my world, but yeah, here in my town, it's the Basta Furniture Company. It's like one of the world's largest companies out there. They do pasty furniture stuff. Up here in my town, we got a lake called Philpott Lake, which is the biggest. Well, it's not a lake; it's more of a dam, basically. Of course, we got Fairstone Park, and I was also the town that I'm in is known for the Martinsville Speedway for NASCAR.
Wow,
Yeah, yeah,
wow,
and let's see what else. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna get the Martinsville Speedway, which I live an hour from Mount Airy, North Carolina, which I'm going there tomorrow.
right,
Um, so yeah, it's not really a big town. Like I said, it's a population is 900, and if you want to do something exciting, you got to go like an hour away, which I'm like an hour from Roanoke, Virginia. Uh, that's where all the big entertainment goes to. But yeah, like I said, which I live basically in the woods almost. Trees surrounding me. It's peaceful and quiet, and that's
great.
what I like.
That's great. That's great. You talk about you have 900 people, in your town. I got 900 people living on my street. Well, no, I'm teasing a little bit. A bunch of years ago, I used to work Virginia as a regional sales manager. I don't know if I mentioned that to you when we talked last week, but when I was working for Luxottica, I was a regional sales manager of the eyeglass company, and part of my region was Virginia. So I had a rep who lived in Southern Virginia, really rural, like yourself. And I would fly I fly into Washington or I fly into Northern Virginia. He'd pick me up and I'd work with him, and we'd go on the road and he'd take me. He'd take me, to Western Virginia. Really, I mean, it's really mountainous and it was a culture, shock for me. And he lived near they had some peanut farms down there too, and he used to give me peanuts. But it was one of my favorite places to visit because of the difference in culture that that I liked, that meant a lot to me. It was just different. Of course we'd go for when we were in West Virginia, we'd stop off for breakfast in a little place that served grits, which I still don't know what grits are to this day, but I saw, my cousin Vinny, I saw the movie, but I mean, I loved the whole, um, I just loved that whole time that I spent with it because it was so different and refreshing, and it was kind of neat. And I always used to say, could I live here? And of course, I used to tell people when I would go to a place that I loved, I used to go to Arizona a lot, and I loved, and in Virginia, I used to tell my rep, I love it down here. It's so country, it's so nice, the air is great. And he said, well, why don't you move here? And I would say I can't because I'm addicted to the smell of car exhaust in the morning, which you get in New Jersey. And that was always my funny answer why we couldn't move there. So um, let's now talk about you are a successful podcaster. You have conversations with Jacob. Um, and so how did it begin? Tell me the story of how it began and
All right. Well, my podcasting journey began in 2015. And it wasn't much of a podcast back then. It was more of me having my own show on YouTube. And I was doing the same thing that I was doing now. I was interviewing people, maybe two or three people. And then in 2016, that kind of dropped the ball on that one. Then in 20, I think in 2017 and 2018, which I started another podcast. I can't remember the name, but that kind of dropped the ball on that one. And then I had another one in 2021 called The Weekend with Jacob. And that was on every Sunday at 6 p.m., which I was doing the same thing as I'm doing on my podcast now. Uh, let's see, and that podcast lasted for 30 episodes, and then it kind of died out. Then in 2023, I started Conversations with Jacob, and that's been going for almost 2 years.
Okay.
And uh, let's see, in January it'll be 2 years, but I've had over like almost 100 episodes almost, and I've talked to over 80 some people.
Wow. Wow.
So
Great.
so it kind of started from 2015, and I didn't expect to go this long because usually every podcast and that I've had, which it always kind of died out, but this right here is almost to 100 episodes.
That's great. By the way, it's great. Listen, I've been doing this 4 years. 4 years. And you and I, well, you and I are a little bit different. We're different ages. I'm a card-carrying member of AARP, American Association of Retired Persons. So I sit in this chair and I collect Social Security. So it's different for me. There's nothing. This is a wonderful thing for the brain because it makes me think, and I think it keeps me young, and I know it keeps me young. So you have a milestone coming up. I think you said the beginning of the year, like 100.
Uh, let's see here. Uh, in January it'll be 2 years, and on February 3rd it'll be the 100th episode.
That's great. That, by the way, it's a great milestone because everything I know about podcasting, it's not a lot, but people do two or three or four or five and they're done.
Yeah.
So there ain't too many folks who hammer it out to 100. And in my case, I'm up to 360, something like that. Between but it's a wonderful gratification that we get because we meet a lot of people. You did you did a bunch of cool things. But the one with David Newell,
Yeah.
who most people don't know, he's Mr. McFeely from Mr. Rogers, is it?
Yeah, yeah. He was Mr. McFeely, Mr. Rogers, and he was also the public relations for Mr. Rogers. He was on matter of fact, he was on the first episode of the podcast, and that episode has over. I see. The last time I checked, it was 1.8 thousand views.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fabulous. By the way, that is fabulous, Jacob.
Oh yeah.
Really. We podcasters, it's a hard world out there because everybody is fighting to get people's attention, and there's so much content out there. So the fact that you did that is absolutely tremendous. Really
Oh,
is. Sure,
oh
just
yeah.
absolutely tremendous. Um, you've done there was one I of course I did my research. I looked at a lot of the titles. You did something else that I thought was really interesting. You had somebody on and you talked. I thought this was great. You talked about epilepsy in prison and prison.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and that right there was just something that happened at the last minute. But yeah. Oh, I think the guest was Mike Knox, I believe. That's who that was, and we talked about his prison life. Oh, with him being a prison guard, and his daughter who has epilepsy, and there was a good episode. I thought it was as well.
Yeah. So you've really had some. There was one recent one, something about dying. I didn't pay attention to that because I'm not in the mood to that. But the diversity of your content is great. You did something about some parade, a Christmas parade too, that got a bunch of
Yeah.
views.
Yeah, now with my podcast, the thing with my podcast is every episode is different. It don't surround on one thing or one topic or whatever. it kind of spreads out. I was out talked to people all over the world. I talked to people in the UK. I talked to people in the Netherlands. So from all over the world, which is
Great.
interesting.
It's great. The more we do this, the more we do this, the more we're out there, the more people find us. And again, we're probably, alphabetically, conversation with Jacob, conversation with Calvin, it's this, so we get discovered. I was telling you before we went air, I got contacted by someone in Nigeria. Uh, and this was like 6 months ago, and we went back and forth, and I had no idea who. I mean, I knew it was a guy, but I didn't know. But anyway, we met finally after all those months. We met and we chatted and we did a thing yesterday. It turned out to be a 17-year-old kid named Daniel O'Bara, who was about as grounded and mature, and he just had so much depth, and he's a podcaster too, like us. But it was like, oh wow. And I'm saying to myself, this is great because I'm meeting so many interesting people like yourself, and it's just good stuff. Um, Moving away, you again in looking and doing my social media research, you participated recently in something, and I'm always fascinated in some kind of hypnosis with
Well,
part.
which I did, well, I did not participate in. I watched it.
Yeah,
Hell,
tell me about that.
yeah. Well, it was at the Salem Fair up in Salem, Virginia. Um, and there was this guy. I think his name was Richard Barker, and he's like a celebrity hypnosis. And of course, me and my mom and brother went to see his show there, and my mom kind of told me that I need to go up there and participate. I said nope. I said that's not for me. I said I'd rather watch from the audience, and so I did. And at first I didn't believe in it,
I
but
was
after
going
I
to ask you.
saw, you know, I didn't believe in it at first, but when I saw the people kind of slump down in their chair and just kind of act goofy a little bit, I was like, well, maybe it is real after all.
Wow. So you actually saw this stuff and you started to believe in this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Wow.
oh
Uh,
yeah.
all the different things I've done in my day, that's something I don't know if I would ever do it like yourself. I don't want to give somebody that power over me, and I no, I don't think I could ever do it. But you've done things and I've done things, and this is what fascinates me, and we didn't really talk about this, but and I'd love to hear, you've had a bunch or some paranormal experiences. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, which I've had maybe 3 or 4 encounters. If you'd like to hear all 4, then I'll tell you all 4.
Yeah, I
Alright,
really would.
alright, well, I'll try to go in order here. The first one, happened when I was in elementary school. We lived in a two-story house. The bedroom and living room was all upstairs, and the kitchen was downstairs. And, and late one oh, it was late one night, my stepdad and grandma was watching TV, and they heard her footsteps coming up the steps from the kitchen. And so my stepdad got up and opened the door, and there wasn't nobody there. And so he closed it, walked back, and he heard it again. Of course, nobody was there. That was when it first kicked off. And then one day, my mom was taking me, my brother, outside to play, and she hollered downstairs, "Hey, I'm taking the kids out to play." And then there, and then a voice came back and said, "Okay, I'll be up in a minute." Well, we thought it was my stepdad. Well, it turns out to be he was walking down the road from the store up the road. So a spirit or whatever kind of mimicked his voice,
Wow.
but in reality, and he was walking down the store at the time was Acres Supermarket, which it ain't there no more. But yeah, he was coming down the road, but yet if he's coming down the road, and how could he be inside the house?
Wow.
So, and that's when it kind of kicked off.
How
Uh,
how how old were you?
was probably in kindergarten.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow.
Now the story or the myth is with that house, and there was a woman doing witchcraft, and she got pushed down the steps by got pushed down the steps by something, and it broke her neck and died. I don't know how true that is, but the next story happened around 2006, 2007. We lived in this mobile home, and my stepdad was sleeping on the bed, and he woke up and seen a little boy in the doorway. Of course, at the time, everybody was sound asleep, and there shouldn't be a little boy in the house. But he got up, everybody went to sleep the next day, went down to the landlord's house, which I was with him, and my step my stepdad said, we had a visitor last night, and she said, who? My stepdad told her, and the landlord said, oh, and you saw him too.
Wow.
So that turns out that what we saw was real, and Lord and behold, that boy's bedroom was my bedroom.
Wow.
And I kind of had trouble sleeping because I didn't know if I was going to wake up and see the little boy in my room.
Wow.
Then the last story happened when my grandma passed away in August of 2021. He was up there when the funeral home came and got her, and they done left, and we was all in the kitchen. The next thing you know, and we heard the front door open or slam. And and the thing is, the whole time that door was locked. So we thought she was coming back. And that's some of the paranormal encounters that I've had. And where I'm at now is I've had a few, but not too much to kind of focus on.
Wow. Wow. I'm fascinated by this stuff because when you interviewed me, we talked a little bit about some of my paranormal experiences, which I'm not going to get into now. This is about you, but and I'm a believer because I've lived it. And I wrote a novel about spirituality and spirits and stuff. So I believe it, and it's. And by the way, I think it's a gift for those of us who are lucky to experience. I think it's a gift, and I think we all, my own personal opinion, we all have that gift, but most of us are just so busy in our worlds, working and doing whatever we're doing, and we don't have time to kind of open ourselves up to those special senses and forces. But I don't think anybody doesn't have it. We all have it, but most of us are just too busy. But anyway, it's that's interesting stuff. It makes you kind of think.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go off topic and ask one of my favorite questions. It's a one-word answer, and actually, you don't even have to answer it. But actually, I think for the first time since I've been doing this, I think I know the answer. But anyway, here's the question. I'm a wise guy. I think I know the answer. So here's the question. I like it. So, excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with. I think I know the answer.
I was either good with Elvis Presley.
Sure. Boom. Okay. I didn't even have to ask it because I knew the answer. But anyway, that's one of my favorite questions. And you know, I just like to get into background. When you're not when you're not podcasting and stuff, what are some of the things you love to do?
I like to spend time outdoors when it's not too hot. I like to watch TV. I like to sit down and read a little bit because I'm a big book reader. I got enough books to start a library almost. Which I like to just watch YouTube videos on my computer. I play the guitar every once in a while.
Mhm.
Um, I like to listen to my Elvis vinyls on the record player. And when I'm able to, I like to travel.
Great. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Um, I'm an old movie guy. Um, hopelessly so. I love old movies. I love the old black and white movies, and I love westerns and stuff. Some movies that you like, movies,
Oh,
actors.
oh boy, that's a hard question. I like to watch The Rifleman on TV.
Wow,
That's like an old western, yeah.
wow,
I like to watch the I Love Lucy shows, the Andy Griffin show, of course.
sure.
um, I, wa- I like to watch like the old movies. I'm not too interested in today's movies or today's shows or today's singers. I'm more of a guy that's interested in stuff before I was born. Because like I mentioned, someone said I was born in the wrong era because I like stuff that most people my age don't like. So I find it, kind of interesting. Has favorite actor? Um, I don't know.
Right.
Oh, oh, it's out to go with Robin Williams.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. He I marvel at Robin Williams. I marvel at his mind. I marvel at his energy. And he did one of my favorite movies, The World According to Garp. It was a strange, strange movie. He plays this instructor, and his mother is a nurse and a writer. It was a very strange movie. It was almost surreal. But when I wrote my novel, I always promote when I wrote "There's a Tortoise in My Hair." The people who reviewed me, Kirkus Reviews, they compared me to John Irving, who wrote The World According to Garp. They said I'm the same kind of writer, which was
Wow.
an amazing thing for me to get a review like that. But it's funny. In The World According to Garp, one of my favorite scenes with Robin Williams, of course. He and his wife are with a real estate broker, and they're looking to buy a house, and she's showing them houses, and a small plane. They hear a small plane coming in, and it's getting closer, and it almost hits them and crashes into the house and takes out the whole second floor of the house. And they all ducked. And when they all stand up, the real estate broker is shocked and horrified. And she says, I guess you don't want this house. Let's go. And Robin Williams says, this is a great line. And Robin Williams says, no, we want the house because airplane crashed proof. A plane will never hit this. The odds of plane will never hit this house again. We want to buy it. I just thought that was one of the great lines that I've ever seen, and the way he delivered it was great. Um, I just love these personality type things. If you had a superpower, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Oh boy. um, if I had a superpower, it would be to make things levitate, I guess. I like if I wanted something to cross the room, I could just put my hand out and and just grab it. Yeah.
Okay. Back back in uh back in the 60s, I had an experience, I won't get into it, when I actually felt I was being levitated. I lived at home with my parents, and I was in college, and I still think about that. I don't have a lot of recollection, but I felt I was being levitated, whatever that means. Um, uh, what are the as we kind of wind down, what are some of the helpful resources that you go to help you navigate and move along in life? What things?
Um, not quite sure.
All
Oh,
right.
it's I just yeah. What?
Well, I mean, you use
Heck,
the yeah. Like, how do you find guests? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
how
yeah.
do
With
you
that. Okay,
research
yeah.
and find guests?
Yeah, well, to find guests from a podcast, which I usually just go on the internet, and it's kind of funny because because I go online, I just type in things and that I'm interested in. Like if I'm interested in the paranormal or politics or whatever, I type in the name, and then sometimes it pops up someone's name or whatever, and I try to find them. And sometimes it works, sometimes it work. And finding guests can be hard sometimes
Yeah.
because I could be wanting to talk to someone about a certain topic and have no contact information on them, and then I'm stuck having to find someone else to replace them. And so when it comes to guests, which I usually look at what other shows are doing, which I try not to steal their idea or guess. I like to kind of take their idea and kind of turn it into my own idea.
Okay.
And that's how I usually do it. And to finding guests, I just use the internet, which I use some sites. Some sites are reliable, and some sites are just not as good as the other.
Okay. Okay. Hey, listen, I'm grateful for that because I've been lucky. I've been lucky. In the beginning, it was hard. I'm starting a podcast just like you, and how do I find guests? So I went to people who I knew, and it was hard. Now, of course, now that we're established a bit better, it gets easier because people kind of reach out to you. It gets better. Last question, a silly question, but they're provocative questions. Does anything keep you awake at night?
Oh boy. I well, I do have a sleeping problem to where I don't go to sleep until about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Me too.
Uh, I, I don't know what causes that. Sometimes I could go to bed before 12 o'clock, and sometimes I'm up at 2 o'clock a.m. I'm scrolling through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I think that's the problem right there, but I don't know. But yeah, I used to stay up all night sometimes. I used to stay up from like 1 a.m. until 1 p.m. the next day. They're kind of got the better of me as I got older. But yeah, nothing really keeps me awake. I just can't sleep at night.
Yeah, me too. 2 o'clock is early for me. I usually go to bed at 3. No, terrible. It's terrible, terrible. And I come down here. It's funny. My whole life changed a bunch of years ago. Uh, I try to go to bed early, like at 1 o'clock. Couldn't, I couldn't sleep, and I came down here and I started playing around, and I decided I want to listen to a song called. It was by the Bee Gees, '60s group. It was called Lamplight. I don't know why I want to listen to it. I back in those days, 15, 20 years ago, you had this thing called Casa Light, not like YouTube. There was no YouTube back then, only 20 years ago. And I stayed up and I found a song. It was a file sharing thing. And I found Lamplight and took and then I downloaded. It took about, computers were slow back then. So it took about an hour and a half to download this 3-minute song. And then at 4:30 in the morning, things happened and something happened that changed my whole life around. I wrote about it in my novel. Uh, 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 I met an old friend from like 30, 40 years ago. Uh, um, uh, and name is Billy, and we got reunited. It's just strange, but it took place at 4:44 in the morning, and there I am, emailing somebody at 4:44 in the morning. Wild stuff. So I'm a night person like yourself. So you know what, Jacob, you find yourself up at 2 in the morning, go check me out on Facebook and see if I'm around. We can chat. We can do that now that we're friends and stuff. So. Uh, this is great stuff. And
Oh
I'm so
yeah.
thrilled I was a guest on your show, and I'm thrilled that you're a guest on my show. And this is the kind of stuff that can be continued.
Oh yeah.
Yes, truly. And I thank you so much for your time, and I thank you for my interview, which I think I remember you said September 23rd. And this should be up in a week or 2 weeks, something like that. We'll figure that out. But I really thank you so much for meeting and getting to know you and stuff. So I'm welcoming you to come back, inviting you to come back, and we'll talk about stuff uh, uh, and the thing that really fascinates me the most is country rural living because
Oh yeah.
I guess deep inside, I think I'd like to do that, but I'm stuck here and on my street with 900 people, whatever. So, thank you, Jacob.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, have a wonderful time in Mount Airy the next couple of days. One of my heroes, Barney Fife. I love Don Knotts. And I always marvel at Ronnie Howard, coming from that show, become a major director. I mean, that show was just you know, MP. I mean, all of it. For me, I mean, I grew up to that show. I loved it. So, and you live in it,
Yeah.
so I think that's great. So,
Oh yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Don't leave. I'm going to stop recording. Please come back and have a great time. Thank you, Jacob.